Greetings, friends, and welcome to my guide on the Savage Cuff of the Sun. This encounter has 4 mini-bosses, all with different mechanics and a hard enrage of 10 minutes and 30 seconds. The enrage starts once you engage the first boss. Even if you reset him, the enrage timer will still count down. You must either die or leave the instance to reset the timer. If you die in between bosses, you will have to start all over from the beginning, so this is definitely a test of endurance and proper cooldown usage. I will go into each of the mechanics as we make our way through the phases for each boss. I'm sure there are many other strategies that work just as well, all leading to success, but I will be covering the ones we use as a group to best suit our playstyle and composition. Alright, let's get started. Okay, so the first boss is Blaster. In my opinion, he is one of the toughest because of all the RNG, but overall, once you see the fight enough, he isn't too bad. I would suggest tanking Blaster in the middle of the room to make handling upcoming mechanics as easy as possible. The first thing you'll notice after pulling the boss is he will use Brute Force, which is a high damaging attack on the main tank that applies a stacking magic resist down debuff. This debuff doesn't affect Blaster's damage at all, but it will affect the magic mines that spawn later in the fight. So basically, whichever tank is tanking Blaster cannot grab the mines. The off tank will have to do that. The next mechanic the boss will cast is called Mind Blast. This must be silenced. If Mind Blast finishes, it will be an extremely funny wipe. Mind Blast does moderate raid damage and confuses the entire raid, forcing you to attack each other, which will likely result in a wipe, so silence that shit. After this, mines will be spawning soon. There are 2 types of mines, blue and red. The red mines are normal, don't stand in this shit or blow up kind of mine. The blue mines, however, need to be triggered, or after roughly 10 seconds they will explode and wipe the raid. The blue mines will do high damage and should be mitigated with a cooldown or tank stance. They will also cause knockback in the direction you triggered it, so be careful not to get knocked into another mine unless you are prepared for it. The off tank will probably need a spot heal in between, so keep your eye out for that. If someone runs into the red mine, it will likely kill you, but if it doesn't, it will do high damage and put a nasty paralysis debuff on you. The main tank should pull Blaster to the most open or safest spot as the mines are spawning, while the off tank grabs the blue mines immediately when they spawn. Players should try and move with the main tank and not be standing next to the blue mines because the off tank will not have time to wait for people to move. They need to be triggered as soon as possible. The next mechanic will be dive bombs, or charges. Blaster will target 4 random players and a mirage will drop down on them, dealing moderate AoE damage, so be sure not to be stacked. The mirages will then turn to target a random party member and dive through them shortly after. The charge does high damage, causes knockback, and applies damage down. The idea is to try and bait them so they are covering as little of the arena as possible. With all the RNG of the mine placement and who the mirages will target, it can be difficult sometimes. Try and bait them near the side the main tank takes Blaster to. Then after the drop, take a couple steps toward the wall to bait their charge, then dodge to the middle of the arena. Be careful though, because a mine might be in the middle of the arena or next to a safe spot. It seems difficult at first, but once you see it a few times, you'll get the hang of it and it will get a lot easier. After these charges, he will use Brute Force 2 more times, but these can be skipped by pushing him to 50%. Upon reaching 50%, Blaster will disappear and 4 small mirages circling a big mirage will spawn in the center of the arena. This is a DPS check. They will begin to cast an uninterruptible Mind Blast and need to be killed as soon as possible. If they complete their cast, Mind Blast will do moderate raid damage and apply a stack of damage down. Ideally, you want all of them dead, but if one goes off, you can still recover. After this, Blaster will dive down on the main tank for moderate AoE damage, so stay away from him. He will then start with Mind Blast, so be sure to silence this, following it up with Brute Force, then Mines. Handle these mines exactly the same as the last set. While repositioning the boss, the main tank will be hit with another Brute Force. Mirage charges will follow. These charges are a little different. The Mirage will tether itself to a random party member. The Mirage will either have its arms up or down. If its arms are up, look away because it's scary, or maybe he wants to play piggyback. But if they are down, look at him and give him a hug because he is sad, or he is challenging you to a shootout and you ain't no bitch. Whatever will help you remember better, but arms up, look away from the Mirage, arms down, look towards the Mirage. After this, there will be another brute force, Mind Blast, and more mines, so be prepared for the damage on the main tank and have your silence ready. Around this time, assuming nothing too terrible has happened, Blaster should be dead and you will be heading to the next boss. Now for Brawler. The first thing I want to say is that whichever tank was tanking Blaster cannot tank Brawler at the start. The reason for this is because of the magic resist down stacks that Blaster applied. Brawler is completely magic based, so until those stacks fall off, if you take damage from him, you will likely die in one hit. Brawler has two phases. Brawler applies its own stacking magic resist down debuffs. There should be a tank swap at 2 to 3 stacks. We swap at 3, so the stacks will fall off of one tank before phase 2. I'm sure with better gear, the swaps will be completely different, but as of right now, with low item levels, we have the tank swap at 3. There will also be flying saw blades that circle the arena. If you go under them, you will likely be hit with moderate damage and suffer a cleansable paralysis debuff. Simply avoid them. Brawler has different attacks that are somewhat RNG and based off of which weapon he readies. Brawler has 4 different weapons. Single laser. This is a tank buster and must be mitigated. Don't be on his side for this because the range of this ability from side to side is surprisingly wide. Double laser. This is a split damage mechanic. This ability must be split with the majority of the party. Single drill. This ability will target a random player and is proximity based, so get far away. Double drill. This ability targets the closest and farthest person in relation to Brawler. The attack is a heavy-hitting large AoE. It causes knockback and stun on all players around the targeted player. It is best to bait this out. We have our Black Mage stand all the way against the wall and have another member in the center, so this way we always know who is going to be hit. In phase 1, we have the melee go max melee range on opposite sides so they can both continue DPS on the boss without having to move. In phase 2, we have our Astro or White Mage stand in the middle. Our Black Mage position stays the same. So in phase 1, he will do all 4 weapons randomly, at least once before repeating on the 5th. You can skip the 5th weapon attachment with high DPS. His first phase ends when his HP reaches 0. Now for phase 2. In phase 2, Brawler will become untargetable and move to the center of the room. There will be a shield around him. You can touch the shield though. Different orbs will spawn from the edges of the arena and will begin to move towards the center. The different orbs are small orbs. Simply DPS and kill these. They are stunnable and should be slowed. Green orbs. These have to be triggered by a tank running through them. They will do high AoE damage around them. Be sure to designate which tank is running through these. The rest of the raid should avoid the green orbs because they will need to be exploded ASAP. The big orbs. 2 big orbs will spawn. You cannot kill these. When they touch the center of the arena, they will explode for high raid-wide damage. You'll want to stagger when they hit the center by leaving one alone and marking one to stun and slow. The timing of these is crucial because you do not want 2 going off at once. You can apply debuffs on them like Dragon Kick or Delirium and Path to help soften the blow. During phase 2, Brawler will maintain his aggro from phase 1 unless the aggro target dies. It will do all 4 of his weapon attachments from the previous phase. He will always do a random drill, then random laser, then the other drill, and finally the other laser. So if he does double drill first, you know the next drill he will do will be far, so you can plan ahead. It is also recommended to have a designated spot for the tank lasers so people have a consistent safe spot they can run to when he does his lasers. For example, my first group does tank lasers north, while my second group goes south. Any location will do really, just agree on something as a group and it should make things a lot easier. His lasers also hit for a lot less in this phase because you will not have the magic resist down debuff. You will still need either a shield and a tank stance to live, or a cooldown. For the split laser, just have the two tanks split it instead of the party. This phase can be a bit tricky at first because of all the different mechanics stacked on top of each other, but I think the key to this phase is simply knowing which weapon Brawler will be using and timing the big orbs correctly. Once this is done, the phase isn't bad at all. After all the orbs are done and Brawler has used all of his weapons at least once, the shield will drop and the fight will be over. Now on to the next boss. Okay, now for my favorite boss by far, the Swindler. This guy is fucking awesome. He is really easy but extremely punishing if you mess up. This boss tests to see if you're paying attention or not. Don't worry though, everyone gets swindled at least once. It's cool, we're all friends here. Okay, so this guy doesn't apply any debuffing stacks, but he still hits the main tank really hard, so be prepared for the main tank to take massive damage out of nowhere. If you look at the ground, you should tank Swindler where four corners meet. This will make handling the upcoming mechanics much easier. The Swindler has two main mechanics, height and stack. Height. All the platforms will either elevate and glow red or sink into the ground. The whole raid will either get a temporary red or purple debuff. If you look closely, you can see a black explosion in the top right corner of the purple debuff and a black explosion in the bottom left corner of the red debuff. This indicates where you need to be standing when the cast finishes. If you have the red debuff, you need to stand on an elevated platform. If you have the purple debuff, you will have to stand on one that is sunk into the ground. So basically, red high, purple low. If you mess this up, it will kill you instantly. Once the debuffs go away, you are free to move wherever. Stack. A random tank and healer will be targeted with a circle. There will be 2 to 4 small green orbs above those players' heads. This indicates how many people need to be in the circle before the ability resolves. There will never be 2 sets of 4, or 1 stack with less than 2. You need to have the correct amount of people in each circle or everyone in the circle will be killed instantly. Ideally, you want to split your party into 2 groups, melee and tanks in one, and range and healers in another. The tanks and healers should be priority 1 and 2, while the melee and range should be 3 and 4. Make the decision as a group which melee and range are 3 and 4. This way, it will make the mechanics super easy on who should stack when. Height and stack will go out simultaneously first, then he will cast a hard-hitting raid damaging ability called Bioarithmetics. Make sure people are topped and mitigation like Dragon Kick and Path are applied. Shortly after this, a lot of adds will spawn. A Gobwalker, Hardhelm, Hardmine, and Maiden Soldiers. These adds will maintain their aggro from the Swindler. The Hardmine and Hardhelm will try and buff the boss and all enemies around them, so this should be stunned to prevent their casts. There are 2 different strats here. Cast or LB all the adds, or to save LB3 for the next boss. Both are really good, and depending on your group, you'll have to make a decision, but neither one is wrong. Depending on which LB you use will depend on the position of the boss. Swindler will release a green wave that buffs his damage for all friendly allies within the wave, stacking up to 8 times. These stacks are not permanent and will drop once the adds are killed. If you want to save for melee LB3, you'll need to separate Swindler from the adds while you burn them down, so move him to the opposite side. If you caster LB here, then have the main tank remain in the same spot and just pop Living Dead, Hollowed, or Holmgang, and caster LB should instantly kill all of them. Have the off tank Voke and hold the Gobwalker to prevent the main tank from getting any vulnerability up stacks. During adds, he will try and swindle you by doing another height mechanic. This is shortly followed by another stack and bioarithmetics. After the raid damage, 4 snipers will spawn in cardinal directions. This is a DPS check. These snipers will fix themselves on random party members and do low damage at first, but buff themselves after each attack, and increase their damage greatly with each additional shot. Ideally, you don't want them to get off a second shot, but you can live through two. The third shot is fatal. You should plan out which DPS are attacking which sniper. For example, in my first group, we have the Dragoon and main tank attack the one to the north, while the Bard and off tank get the one to the west, Monk gets the one to the east, and Black Mage gets the south. The healers can also help out a little bit here as well if people are struggling to kill these in time. Swindler will send out another green wave attempting to buff himself, so either tank him in the middle of the room or kill the ad he is closest to extremely fast to prevent him from getting any damage stacks. During ads, there will be another height mechanic followed shortly by a stack, so be sure to kill the snipers as soon as possible and get back to your locations. Here there will be back-to-back bioarithmetics, so be prepared for massive raid damage. Stay stacked and apply mitigation like Virus, Dragon Kick, Path, Soil, Succor, or Bubble. You don't need all of that, but some combination of 3 or 4 will suffice. After the raid damage, there will be another height and stack. Ideally, Swindler will be dead here. Now on to the Vortexer. Alright, so there are a lot of different strategies that can be used on this guy, all leading to success. Now I won't be covering all of them, but I will be going over the ones used by my groups. Proper positioning is key to this fight. There will be a few different positions the group will have to be familiar with and adhere to. Here is our positioning for the different mechanics. We tank Vortexer in the middle of the room and designate sides to handle the different mechanics. We take the first water to the west, fire stack point north in front of the boss, lightning to the northeast, and second water to the south. Now all of this will make sense in a bit. It's really not as complicated as it appears. So the first thing you'll notice when engaging Vortexer is he applies a stacking physical resist down debuff. He puts 4 stacks total before repeating his rotation, so we tank swap at 2. The next ability he will cast is called Elemental Jammer. This is his main mechanic. A water and lightning debuff will be applied to 2 random DPS. Both debuffs will begin to count down and will explode upon reaching 0, dealing high damage. So be sure everyone is topped and shielded. If any player with the debuffs die, they will explode and wipe the raid. You also handle each one differently. The water debuff should be split between at least 4 people total. It will leave a tornado wherever it explodes, pass the water debuff to a random person hit, and give the original target water resist down, making them not able to share any more waters until the rotation resets. The tornado that the water debuff leaves must be frozen with ice circles or destroyed with the fire that comes later in the fight. If you get too close to the tornado, it will tether itself to the player and do damage. If the tornado is not frozen or destroyed with fire, it will pulse and wipe the raid. The lightning debuff should be split between 2 people total. Upon exploding, it will be passed to the other person. For fire, he will shoot missiles in the air and target random people with AoE circles and red markers. The AoE circles will leave sludge behind. If you stand in it, bad and terrible things will happen to you, so don't stand in it. You will get a very nasty dot. It can be cleansed though. The markers will indicate a fire line AoE coming from the boss. This is where the fire that is needed to destroy the second tornado comes from. We assign positions for the fire lines. They will always target a tank, healer, and 2 DPS. The tanks will always go south to destroy the second tornado. After the fire goes out, there will be another stack applied to the tank. We do a tank swap here. The water and lightning debuffs will also be close to exploding, so we handle it by taking the first water to the west and the lightning northeast of the boss. The off tank will share the lightning while the range and healers share the water. If a melee gets targeted with water, they will have to run over and share the damage and place the tornado to the west before the buffs expire. Immediately after the debuffs explode for the first time, ice circles will go out over 2 random players dealing moderate damage. You will need to place one of them close to the tornado, but not too close. If you look at the edge of the ice ring, you want a marker's distance apart from that and the tornado. Once in position, wait until you see the damage go out before you move. The game doesn't actually lock your position in until the damage is shown. Once the ice circle is placed, it will expand. This expansion needs to touch the tornado in order to freeze it. If you fail to freeze a tornado, it's a wipe. After this, you will need to handle passing water and lightning debuffs again. At this point, the water should be on a random DPS or healer, and the lightning should be on the off tank. Make sure the first person that had water doesn't stack with the next one. Take the next water debuff to the south and have the off tank give the lightning to the main tank. After this exchange, immediately stack up in front of the boss again because fire will go out. Handle these puddles and fire lines exactly the same by having everyone go to their predetermined locations. Now this time, when the tanks go south, line yourself up with the tornado and destroy it with fire. Now immediately following the resolution of fire, have the group go to their predetermined pushback points because Vortexer will immediately cast Super Cyclone, which does moderate ray damage and knockback. Once the pushback happens, stay still for a second to make sure water and thunder are split properly. Immediately following all that raid damage, the main tank will be hit very hard by brute force, which will apply another stack of physical vulnerability up, so be sure to top him up. Shortly after this, Vortexer will cast Ultra Flash, which must be LOS'd by the frozen tornado. Ultra Flash cleanses all debuffs and removes everything from the arena. Make sure to tank swap during the cast because at this point the other tank stacks have fallen off. Once Ultra Flash happens, the entire rotation repeats itself and you have now seen the entire fight. The one good thing about this fight is that you can practice it by placing markers and doing dry runs outside of the instance. But yeah guys, that's all I got. I hope this guide was helpful and will lead to some sweet first clears. Peace guys.